All right. Are you serious? Are you serious? I am so serious, but I have to get the most serious man in the finance world, the guy who has all the answers, hopefully, to the world's problems economically, and can help you and I stay afloat in this crazy world with of economics. To be honest with you, and Bob Kudla with us. Bob, how you doing from Trade Genius?
Well, with that intro, I won't smile then.
All right, Bob. Well, here we go. Okay, Bidenomics. I'm going to try to say it if I can. It's working. I mean, is it? Who's it working for? And what does this mean? Okay.
Well, if you believe the consumer sentiment numbers that fell into the floor, that they even the forecasts were way off. Is that it's not working for the bottom 95%, right? So inflation only works for people that have assets, okay? And increasingly, as inflation rises, you have to be increasingly liquid, which means that at some point in real estate is not a good bet for you. Okay, then the stock market's not a good bet for you, and the only people that eventually will make money are people that have cash, or in the case of treasuries, are holding treasury bonds. And I think that's the game. They want to basically crowd out everybody else. 'Cause remember, these people are communists, right? The Biden administration, they're full of communists. They don't call it communism, but that's exactly what it is. They wouldn't mind if every corporation was had no profit, okay? And they have the ability through the Federal Reserve and the Mint or the debt markets to basically create whatever spending they need to spend. And the thing about governments versus the private sector is that government directs investments towards the politically connected versus the private market directing investments towards where they think they can get the best return. They have two different goals. So the more and more the government becomes the arbiter of the future, the poorer and poorer people will eventually get, but they don't really care because they're always going to be the first in line at the pig trough. So Bidenomics is working exactly as planned. It's just not the plan that most Americans want, but it's designed for ultimate control.
So the article just broke today. Speaking of communism and markets, China fired their gun today, basically by selling off $140 billion of their debt, which they say will help boost their economy. And and I take it that means that their economy is become stagnant, if not hurting. Can you help us understand what's the purpose of selling off debt, and is America doing that also?
Yeah, they're not selling off debt, they're selling debt.
Okay.
So if selling off debt would be like getting rid of the treasuries, right? For cash. Selling debt is that we're going to be creating Chinese yuan out of thin air by going to the debt markets, and then we're going to then redirect that money towards favored industries that they want to invest in China. So you have to look to see where the money is going to go, right? Are they there to support the property developers? Are they there to support next gen technology? Are they there to support a consumer market? That'll tell you what China's up to. Now, in the past, China was always investing in their next industrial project, right? So that's probably where they're going to probably put this money. But remember, the United States, we whenever you deficit spend, you're selling debt, right? So um, what you have in the United States is we just have a consistently running deficit. And so you get to a point where you reach the Rubicon where the additional debt does not support growth in GDP. In fact, it starts taking away from GDP growth, and then it starts taking away from GDP, period. And that's the phrase I'm sure you've heard before. It's called pushing on a string.
Mm-hmm.
We're pushing on a string right now. So you got to understand, look, when you're paying 5% money, 90-day yields, the rich, they're not going to invest in any. What business would you invest in right now? Correct. So, and I mean that just in general, forget Biden, whatever. If you look around the world, okay, maybe AI, maybe productivity stuff, maybe robotics, those are areas where you probably get a meaningful return because that's going to save on labor costs down the line. But for the most part, it's just easier for banks to take that cash they've been given and just invest it in 90-day or 2-year treasuries. And remember, banks can leverage up whatever deposits they have by 8x. So
Wow.
yeah, so they could take whatever they have and they could buy 8x worth of treasuries from it. So
So then
that
they're not incentivized actually to loan money.
no, well, they're going to loan
No,
money, but they're going to loan it to the government. That's what I'm saying is that
yeah,
lending standards are being tightened across the board. Look, they effectively killed the primary mortgage market, right? And they're going
yep,
to continue to do that. And I'm not saying that's necessarily wrong. Look, I mean, I own a home. It's going to affect me, but a 0% mortgage is just wild speculation. Our kids can't afford a house, right? So
right.
they created an imbalance that it could be 10 or 20 years before these markets actually settle back out again. Remember, people like you and I, we're not going to be buying in the next house. Now, you already did because you're already down in Florida, I think, right? So
Yeah,
you already sold your home in Indiana, where I'm out here in California, but I'm stuck, right? So, um, I have to find a seller for my home, and then I got to move, and I have enough capital appreciation in my home that I get half it's going to get taxed away on me. So, so but who's going to buy my home? You
yeah.
know,
At these with these interest rates this high, who's going to buy your home?
right?
And but
So,
if they did, then you got to go buy one at high interest,
yeah, well, I would in
or
California.
unless you can
I would get cash
get
because
cash, go to Florida and buy cash, and then you'll be out. Yeah.
yeah, except don't buy a Florida condo because of the new structural
No.
laws.
Yeah.
But
Don't get
yeah,
on the
so
water. No.
there's no free lunch left. But my point is that they're taking speculation out of real estate now. Okay, and we're at a point now where the stock market's at 100, and I think it's 185% market value to the GDP of the country. You know, Jimmy Buffett. Yeah, I wish it was
Jimmy
Jimmy.
Buffett. Well, we need him to come back.
Warren Buffett.
Yeah.
You can tell what I've been doing this weekend. Warren Buffett was saying over 125% of GDP, the market's overvalued, and we're closing in on 200%. At some point, that corrects back down to 75 and 80% of GDP. That's why we're eventually calling for a 50% correction in the stock market, because the nature of the way the bond markets are structured right now, once that starts to unwind, everybody's going to shift their money out of the stock market into the bond market. And that is by design by the government, because at the end of the day, the government needs ready buyers of its
Treasury.
stock treasuries. And this is where the talk you and I had beforehand is because they're loath to tell the American people that we don't have to have a debt market at all. We simply could print from the mint every dollar that needs to be printed to pay for government expenditures. Now that causes inflation,
Right.
okay, but it's transparent inflation versus now we're getting inflation, but they're passing the money through the hands of their donor base, and they're collecting an interest rate. That's the whole purpose behind the devil of Jekyll Island, right? That the banks sit in the
Yeah.
middle and collect a toll. And so, but yeah, we could go straight out, just like in Argentina, he's blowing up the Federal Reserve. I'm going to cough, excuse me. He's going to blow up. He's blowing up the Federal Reserve there because central bank, because he knew that's the game they've been playing. And I think you're starting to hear Trump kind of reverb that a little bit too, saying, "Hey, we got to get more control over what the Federal Reserve is doing." It's a massive slush fund for the bankers, and that's why there's always this high interest in Bitcoin, this high interest in gold, because of liability issues around that. And but that's the plan. So now the thing is, look, You and I can do very little about that, right? And
Right.
as Christians, as I was reminded this weekend from our pastor, is that we have to hold our nose and respect those that God put in authority over us. So we're not going to
I'll
revoke.
try that. I'll try that sermon this weekend. Okay, everybody, just hold your nose.
It was
You
pretty
can't
funny.
help it. God put them there.
That's right. It's not just honor your mother and father. It's not, you have to honor anybody in authority over
I
you,
know it.
and that's a hard pill to swallow. But so that what that means is we're not doing revolution, right? So we have to
Right.
work within
No.
the system, and so you hear that NSA Christians work within the system, and so so you're going to vote and you're going to do your things, but we don't have to participate. I checked the Bible; it didn't say we have to support Bidenomics. Okay,
Okay.
so you don't have to play those games, and you want to be ahead of those games. So now you
We,
know the game, right? So the
so now we
game,
got to know how we, the little people, how can we play and keep our head above water,
yeah.
and
So you
maybe
remember the old joke: two guys are hiking in the woods, and a bear comes out after them and starts chasing them. And the one guy sits down on a rock and he's putting on running shoes. He said, "Why are you doing that? You can't outrun the bear." He said, "I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you." And that's the same thing here with inflation. Is that you have to buy stocks or assets that are going to outrun inflation. And there are things, remember, the rich always give themselves an out, right? So you have to see what they're doing and how they're trading. And there are a lot of high dividend stocks or derivative derived high dividend stocks that will do well in this environment, and of course, Bitcoin has been outpacing inflation since its inception. Gold is now starting to move again. Silver starting to move again.
yep.
Food stocks are starting to move again. Energy has maintained its outperformance here over the last couple of years. It's playing catch up from earlier in the last decade. And then you have a situation where there's some new what they call synthetic ETFs out there that pay very high dividends that are it's very transparently run. Too hard to explain on this show, but there are stocks that are paying well over double digit dividends that use a combination of what they call call writing and put selling, and basically they're creating these collars around an asset that generates income that will all beat inflation. And so those are the areas in which we're focusing on at Trade Genius, because I don't think remember, politicians are going to take the easiest way out possible. It's just the nature of who they are. You don't get elected by telling people hard truth. That's what pastors are for. And so you have politicians who always want to tell people what they want to hear.
Yeah.
And they're going to always do the things that are going to be the least amount of pain or cause the most confusion as to whose fault it is. So they'll always opt for inflation over recession if they can avoid it. But in this situation, we're going to get inflation that's going to cause a recession. And people are starting to see it now. So you're starting to see this massive rotation now that's going to occur the rest of this year out of the things that have been working very well into these high dividend stocks, these what they call low beta, which means they're not violently moving stocks. People are going to be moving into the bond market, okay, to protect themselves, and people are going to be moving into inflation protected stocks like energy, Bitcoin, and gold and silver. And then eventually it's all going to roll over, and the only place you're really going to be safe on is long-term bonds, ironically enough.
So when you talk about politicians, which you do, you're right. They tell you what you want to hear, not what you need to know, and that's the pastor's jobs to do that. Not always what you want to hear, but it's what's going to help you and sustain you. The question I'm going to ask is: I noticed that the Nancy Pelosi's of the world and the politicians of the world that have been a long time. The Joe Biden's 50 years. Everybody that's been in there for 30, 40, 50 years, they're all multimillionaires. And they seem to have an inside on every stock. It's like if we could just see their portfolio where they're going, you would just go ahead and invest and follow it. Is it because they're setting laws or regulating areas to protect the investments in which they have put in? I mean, are they kind of getting a back room somewhere and make a decision? We're going to protect this industry. It's going to drive the stock up, and everybody just basically gets in and follows it. I mean, how is that happening? They're not the smartest people in the world. They're definitely not the cutest people in the world. So how does that happen?
Well, that's one of the ways they do it, but they also create legislation, right? That they know the outcome is going to be good or bad, and they know these things well before they get into hearings and meetings because they're sitting down with their staff, their compatriots, right on both sides of the aisle,
Right.
but also the lobbyists, right? So the lobbyists are the ones that are telling the politicians, "Hey, look, we donated to you. This is the areas that we find concern with." Hey, some of these are good things for them to know. Some of these things are just outright give me an edge. Then the politicians can sit there and saying, "Huh, so if I support the steel industry, steel stocks are likely to go higher." Okay. And so they put this legislation out there. Well, they buy ahead of that. But the thing is, you can't follow their portfolios because they have 90 days before they have to disclose what they own.
Oh boy! So
Right.
they got a 3-month head start on everybody.
Right. They could be out of stocks by the time you get the note they bought it, right? Or they get to disclose it and you buy it because they bought it and they're selling into you. So unless the law changes that within 24 hours of a purchase you have to disclose it, you can't really follow their portfolios. So that's kind of a sucker's game anyway. We looked into that to see if there was an edge there, but it's impossible to get an edge on something that these guys they don't have to report it until they can even be out of it before they even report it. Sometime we looked at because we have access to that data, we could see they bought it and sold it in the same 90-day period. They disclosed both at the same time. So I'm like, okay, how does that help you as an investor? All you just know is that they made money. But they make money in many other ways too. There's sweetheart deals that they get involved in. Hillary Clinton made a ton of money on futures markets, so they whisper to you, "Hey, guess what, guys, we're going to be really getting into this industry. There's probably a couple of really good companies that could get bought here." They buy those companies, maybe years ahead of it. So there's a lot of ways in which they do that. But here's the good news. We don't have to worry about any of that stuff. I was just talking actually, our associate pastor's wife is kind of into the markets and stuff like that. And, and basically, I'm sorry, the dogs are barking.
That's all right.
So basically, what I told her was, because she goes, "Oh, sometimes it's so confusing," but it really isn't. Trading is not confusing at all. It's really, do you believe what you're seeing? And there is what's called a wisdom to the markets. And the wisdom to the markets is you see the momentum, you see you can see the price action, and all you have to do is gear up. And we call them algorithms, but they're basically algebraic expressions. They're looking back, they're looking at different pieces of information, and we know there's a high enough correlation in these things that we calculate that tell us that if we make a trade on these signals, that we have a high percentage chance we're going to make money on that trade consistently. And so what we did, we just simply boiled that down to really looking at three things. And it's literally a 3-second eye chart. You could see it. Are we pivoting the right way? Are we trending the right way? And are we getting a buy signal? And basically, if those all three answered yes, and you can literally look at a chart in 1 second, then you can enter that trade. And so that's what we've done at Trade Genius. And then you don't have to boil the ocean. We know right now that there are certain market sectors that are going to do well in this environment. It's coming up. So you don't have to look at 6,000 stocks. You look at the 300-400 stocks that are in that sector. And then you look at the ones that move the most, which can then bring it down to maybe 40 or 50 stocks you watch. And then every day there's probably 1 or 2 stocks you can take a trade in. And that's all we do. And it's so simple. And it's simple for me because we already set the systems up. And that's essentially what people pay us for, right? We have the information, we make it actionable. could somebody do what we do? Sure, but it's a lot more work. And just
Because
like
you've already done the work.
right, it's like
Why?
I don't do my yard. I can do my yard. I don't do fixed maintenance on my house. I can do maintenance on my house, but I'd rather pay somebody who could do it more efficiently for me, and I could use my time more valuable somewhere else. And the same with the stock market. People just don't trust themselves, and I don't trust myself, but I trust my system, and that's what works for us.
So, folks, Trade Genius, if you go, you can see right there, there's the link. I got it in the description below on this video. There it goes by. You can pick up the phone and call them. There's the number tickering across the screen. So, in other words, Bob, I remember sitting down talking to you probably 10 years ago. You and I had lunch together
Yeah, at
out in
least.
California. And, man, time's flying, isn't it? And I said to you, so how do you decide? I mean, you're a financial genius, and in other words, you really do know the markets and how they work. You've many years experience. And I remember you say, well, one thing I do is I watch the weather, and I watch where in the world catastrophes happen, whether it be earthquakes or hurricanes or bitter winters and stuff. And then you then go and look at that industry. It could be a food commodity or it could be oil, and you then you get out ahead of it and start preparing people to buy in while it's low, knowing it's going to go high. Is that still a strategy? Is that part of the strategy? It's not the only part, I'm sure, but it's part of it.
Yeah, I mean, look, these are what's called seasonalities, right? So, right now we know if you've been watching the world right now, I mean, you've seen the auroras are being visited down into Hawaii. You
Yes.
know, myself and Dave Devine at DAP 2030. I'm sure Dave. We talked about this 10. You and Dave were my first interviews that I did a long time ago. And I said,
Ah,
"Look at this."
okay. It's been a
So,
while. Yeah.
yeah, so Dave and I, we've talked about that. We told people in the middle of 2020s is that we're going to be seeing auroras. These auroras will actually we'll see fronts that'll cross below the equator before this is over. So we know
Wow.
certain things happen because we know the planets do certain things. We know the position of the solar system in the galaxy is certain directions. We know the pitch in the plane of it going up and down through the galactic plane. All these things have historical context that we can measure. Same thing works in the financial markets too. We know there's a seasonality to the presidential cycles. We know there's a seasonality to the market sectors. We know there's a seasonality to what I call human financial behavior. Okay, i.e., fiat currencies collapse. The United States, they said people are waiting for the dollar to collapse, right? You hear that all the time. People don't realize the dollar has collapsed 3 times already. You don't even know
Wow.
it. We,
No.
we
I
got
mean,
up, we got,
2000. Okay. Maybe 1929 crash.
no,
Maybe the 87 October Black Monday.
no.
What
So
about the 2008
no,
Barack
no,
Obama housing? Okay. See, I don't
no.
know.
Yeah. So, we got off the gold standard, right?
Okay.
The
Yeah.
first time the currency that was in
Richard
the
Nixon.
1870s, right? And then in
Okay.
1932, they Roosevelt repriced gold. Remember that,
Gold again.
right?
Okay.
And then in 1971 or 70, Nixon took us off the gold standard completely. We went pure fiat. So we had 3 times this where we basically reset the price of our dollar. So, so these, if you notice, these things happen on 60, 70-year period. So 70
Ah.
times 1970 plus 60, 70 years, you're looking at 2030, 2040. So, we're in that range now where basically the dollar in its current form is going to get repriced. And I think part of what we're seeing with the Biden administration, and I'm not blaming just on Joe Biden.
Right.
This
I
is
understand.
this is a sorry, my phone's ringing now. I'm doing everything I can to distract myself today.
People are trying to buy stock. I mean, you got to answer the phone, Bob. Come on.
So yeah, so but this is end state stuff that's happening right now. And so now that's where you're starting to hear about the digital currencies coming into play, right? So they know there's money locked up. They want to spend it. They want to create velocity. That's the other thing we talked about before we got on call. The government spends money. What they're trying to do is they're trying to ignite what's called velocity. They're trying to basically have the economic activity leave orbit. Okay. But now we've gone from Mars to Earth to Venus gravity, right? So, Venus is very hard to get out of the atmosphere once you're in it. And that's what's happened when you have more and more and more and more debt on your books. It's become nearly impossible for you to create the velocity, because what happens is, look at 2020, they threw trillions of dollars at this market. We've already spent all that, and now we have negative savings rates again. Because look, poor people spend everything immediately. The middle class, the middle class spends it within a year or two, and the upper class puts it away. And so you eventually don't have it. So you have to constantly, just like a drug dealer, you constantly have to have higher and higher and higher doses to get the same result. And at some point, you just simply kill the patient. And that's where we're getting to now. So I would say probably within the next 10 years, we're going to get some sort of reset. And this time it's global. There's no fiat currency, maybe the Swiss franc, that'll survive it. Even like the ruble, because he has positive, commodity prices, he's not going to have a market because nobody's going to trust the ruble, right? With a
Right. No.
country. That's why I don't worry about the BRICS. And so you're going to get a reset. Now, people always say to me, well, the dollar is going to collapse. Well, every other currency is going to collapse before the dollar. All right. So you're seeing it already, because when debt gets extinguished, money supply collapses. So people don't understand money. Money has two components of it, right? It's the money that is generated by the mint, and then there's money that's generated by fiat.
Right. Just printing press. Yeah. Just printing.
Well, it gets borrowed into existence.
Right.
So when you pay off your loan or you default on your loan, the money supply collapses.
Yes.
So we're at this point now where the stock market moves with the money supply. People always want to know, well, what's the stock market going to do next year? All you have to look at is what's the projected growth in the money supply in the markets, and then you get a sense of whether the stock market is going to go up or down. Okay, so we're at a point now where they're really struggling to grow the money supply, even though the government is throwing so much money into the system. The private sector is collapsing as fast as the
under inflation.
Right. So it's really a really interesting dynamic.
So do you see? Let's look at a macro view here. A cashless society. Australia just announced, the biggest bank in Australia just announced $267 billion. There, as of November, no more cash.
Right.
No more. You can't write a check. You can't use cash. It's digital only.
Right.
And I think that's 11% of their total GDP, which means the other banks are going to follow them. And if one continent like Australia does this, then you got to know Europe and the United States, at some point, we're not far behind. This is a global restructuring. Is that what you're saying? A revaluing of the currencies, and it won't be just one currency here and one currency there. It's coming to a head to where it's a global restructure. Does that hurt the little guy? Let me just ask you this. There's a guy sitting here right now. He's working as hard as he can, and he's got 10 grand in the bank, and that's all he's got. Does that 10 grand go away? Is it useless? Is it about the value of 1,000, or does he actually end up with something? I mean, who convinces the world to restructure without everybody losing their shirt? Is what I'm asking.
Oh, I don't think they care.
There we go.
They don't care that if they could control what you spend, how much you're going to be able to revolt, right? The only way you're going to revolt is you're going to be in a barter. You're going to be on a barter system, right? So, look, governments. Look, let's just assume there's no sin in the world, right? And they go to a digital cashless thing, right? That's a good thing, right? Because it's more efficient and less friction. And even for those who want to commit crimes, they can't really, because you could track everything they do and say, right? And so, but now you add in sin on top of it with the politicians, and now there's an easy way to control your end. Look what they're doing to Trump. Can you imagine they could do that to you now simply by saying, I didn't like what Bob and Paul said on their podcast last week. Let's just send them a warning by shutting them out of their banks for a week or two.
Yep.
Okay. And then maybe being hungry there for a while.
Maybe send the IRS in with guns and say,
They
we're
won't-
shutting down your bank account. We're seizing
they don't,
assets.
yeah, they don't have to do any of that. They just turn you off. Like in Canada, they just shut
Just turn you off.
they shut the truckers' bank accounts down.
Yep, that was
So
it.
that's why governments want to do it. Okay,
Yeah.
they're desperate to do it. So now let's set that aside and talk about your other question you had. Sure, once they have all your money locked up digitally, they can say, well, we're repricing all assets down 80%.
Yep.
Okay, we're just going to take it from you.
Yep.
It's a tax, and,
Yep.
and there's nothing you can do about it, right? Well, there's something you can do about it, but you may not survive the day. So that's why. And look, and you and I both know it's coming because the Bible tells us so.
Yep.
But that book that nobody believes that has predicted everything. So, but yeah, so we know it's coming. But look, you can't worry about that now.
No, you can't.
We got to be the version with the lamps on our feet, right? So we have to just live our life. When God calls us, we go. Until then, you have to assume that tomorrow is going to be like yesterday. So that's why people. Because I get this all the time. Well, Bob, if that's the case, why do you even trade? Well, I don't know when God's coming.
We don't know when it's going to happen. I mean,
He
it could still be 50.
Right.
We've been talking about that devaluing thing. That could be still 50 years out. We have no idea.
Exactly.
So you got to work. You got to live now. You got to make things happen now, and you got to feed your family now. So that's what you're trying to teach people, and you are teaching, and it's very successful. So tell them what do they need to do? If somebody's watching right now and says, you know what, I want to learn how to do this. I'm gonna get on the phone when they get off the air here. I'm gonna call, or I'm gonna go to the website there, Trade Genius, and I'm gonna go find out what I got to do. What do they need? What does it take to get them going, Bob?
Oh, well, it's really simple. So we have like 7 bundles that they could pick from, 65% off our normal cost for your listeners, Paul, as always.
Thank you.
They have till Saturday to get the rate. And what you get, though, I mean, what we charge for the service is nothing compared to what you get out of it. So a couple $100 a year, I think $299 is our lowest price thing. It gets you in the room. It gets you trades that I push out every day. It gets you access to what we call our algorithm, the worm, right? So the thing that you need to be able to effectively take the trades. And then there's some training materials. And like I said, you could be in the chat rooms and you can just type in and ask me questions all day long. And so if you join today, tomorrow you could be taking trades with me. And it doesn't really matter the size. There's some really cool, they don't charge commissions now in stocks. So you can get down to even buying 1 share of stock if you wanted to. But there's some really cool ETFs out there now that move around a lot. Like, if you want to trade Bitcoin but was afraid to get in the Bitcoin market, well, there's ETFs that you could take Bitcoin long and Bitcoin short. You could trade the Bitcoin miners. You could trade the Bitcoin, what I call the proxies like Coinbase or MicroStrategy or Square. So that's just an example. If you wanted to trade like NVIDIA, but you're not going to put $800 down for a share of stock. Well, they have these high dividend called yield maxes that are trading for $25 that pay a dividend, could be 40 or 50% annually. So there's ways in which you can speculate with small accounts now that are really effective. And it doesn't matter what the market does. There are ETFs that will, comport to the market environment that they're in. You think Tesla is going to go crash to zero. Well, there's an ETF called Crash. You think all of the new vision technology companies are going to crash, where you can buy SARK. So
you're buying on the prediction that some of these industries were going to crash.
Yeah, so they can,
or you can buy that some of them are going to be highly successful.
Yeah, and you just wait till the worm tells you to buy or sell. It's so we call it see trade, take trade. So we do all that, and no matter the lowest thing you get into, you get access to that. And we have an advanced bundle. We have a crypto bundle if you really want to trade the cryptos. There's a crypto meme coin coming out, ETF coming out now. So people that want to trade all these crazy altcoins but are afraid of those, well, now you can get an ETF for those things, which is exchange traded fund. And so there's something for everybody. We have a VIP room like how you and I are talking, that people can actually talk to me all day. So there's a lot of ways in which you can trade with us. And, I encourage people to check it out. Look, Some of these people don't even trade with me. They just like being in the room because they want to kind of understand. They figure
What's going on?
my consulting is pretty cheap, so
for
so
$299, you actually get to be in the room and get opportunity to trade if you want and take the tips and learn.
so I mean, so I have some people
And
that
you got other bundles that's more money, get you more access and more information.
more access, more information. You could trade options, you could trade futures. Yeah, and like I said, some people just want to be in a room with like-minded people. I just the nature of who I do these interviews with, you know, I'm self-selecting my customers, right? So, people tend to, believe, and I'm not afraid of speaking my faith. So
Nope.
if you hate God and you get in my room, you're going to hear God, so it's really up to you whether you want to stay there or not.
Well, it's a good place to be, knowing
Yeah,
that you're with someone that's a believer,
right.
and you're who believes in the Lord and follows the principles of the Lord.
Yeah,
That's a good room to be in.
yeah.
That's a blessed room. Okay, that's a blessed room.
Yeah, we don't evangelize per se, but
Right, I know.
the questions come up. We
Yeah.
answer them honestly. There's right and wrong in our room, so we're not afraid to talk about those things.
Right.
Everything's done in kindness. We don't let anything get personal, and
Yep.
and so it's a really nice, fun, safe room, and we've had people there for years, and it's really nice. You don't want to trade alone, right? And so we have people that are retired that just sit and hang out for a couple hours every day. They may could take a trade or two or just listen in, but it's a nice way to chat people up. You can't trade 24/7. So, first couple hours of the day, it's pretty active. But now you and I are talking, early morning, my time, almost lunchtime for you, is that the market goes quiet for a couple hours. So then we'll just sit in a room and talk about whatever we want to talk about. It could be anything. And we've talked about everything. So, it doesn't matter. So it's a lot of fun for people. And then you pick up some trades, and a lot of people, they take a couple trades with us. They already paid for the year. So it's a good room. We like it. We haven't raised our price in public
Forever.
years, forever.
Right.
We don't need to. I make enough money with the service, and I make enough money trading. So I'm happy with it. And I like to be in a white hat, be a win-win.
Yep. Let me one last question for you, and that is Bitcoin. I know my wife watches that a lot. I think I'm looking right now. Today it's almost 63,000.
Yeah, it's up a couple thousand.
I think it got up to about 72 or 73, somewhere in there.
It's the high.
So do you see it going back up there again and beyond, or do you see it maybe settling down at 50, or where do you see it going in the next 12 months, let's say?
Yeah, well, actually, it could do both in 12 months. So we think there's going to be a market blow off coming between now and the end of August. Okay. Bitcoin seems to be what's called a liquidity whore. So it likes it when liquidity is going up. So there's a good chance Bitcoin could crack over 100,000. It could get as high as 130,000. I'm not saying it will, but based on the math work that we're doing, that's in the realm of possibilities. And then when the market rolls over hard, Bitcoin can come right back down to where it is, maybe back into the low 50s.
Yeah.
So it's really going to be one of those things where, I know Bitcoin maximalists don't like to hear that, but you just have to look at all the halvings in the past, right?
Yeah.
And Bitcoin has done that. And then we think after that, when the governments really decide to start to shed the value of their fiat, Bitcoin can go into a supply shock and it can go terminally higher. So it's always good to have some. I mean, my personal exposure is in the proxies. So the MicroStrategy's, Coinbase's, those yield stocks. That's how I like to trade it. I own some BITO, which is the ETF that is for the Bitcoin to go higher. But I'll flip that to shorting Bitcoin too. So I'm strictly
play both sides against the middle.
Yeah, I'm a trader. So there's no reason why I need to watch Bitcoin go from 60,000 to 20,000, right? Like it did before. Well, right. I'd rather get off at 55,000 than buy it back at 20. So Bitcoin's volatile enough to be able to do those kind of things. So so that's what Bitcoin's going to do. So we think, Paul, we're right now, May 15th is, which is Wednesday. The analysts will start now calculating what they think the next quarter's earnings are going to be. We think we'll break this quarterly range from the first quarter. If it does, then I think we're going to move meaningfully higher into August. If it does not, let's say I'm wrong with that blow off positioning, the market starts to roll over, then Bitcoin could fall from here, but gold will also fall and energy will fall. And then it's going to be a race to get into the bond market. But we think the way the market's structured right now, that the Fed has ability to create liquidity, Treasury has the ability to create liquidity, and companies have the means to create liquidity, and investors have a lot of cash because they're with these 5% yields on treasuries. There's a lot of cash being generated. So we think there's an appetite and a desire for the markets to push meaningfully higher. And if it does, I implore everybody to get cautious, because then I think we're going to slip into a 2-year bear market that could take us down 50%.
Wow. Well, we'll see what happens, folks. But there you go. Trade Genius. Go right now. Check out the website. Find out what it takes to be and get involved, to understand and to see where markets are going, and to become a trader. Get in the chat room over there. Find out what's going on, and invest, and let's see. Nobody better. Credible, very credible man. Very credible man. And so you might want to make this happen.
Yeah.
Bob, I see. I just put down there the promo code SPRING. I don't know if that's still right.
We'll honor it. So that's not
Okay.
a problem. So just get in there and whatever I promised here, we'll honor it on the show.
There you go.
Yeah, just call. But hey, just I think I promised you last time. Maybe next month we'll just I can throw the charts up and show people how the system works.
Okay, we'll do that.
Yeah.
We'll do that.
And then people realize, well, wow, this is pretty easy.
Yeah. All right, Bob. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for being with us.
No, thanks for having me.
And folks, there you go. Trade Genius. Go check it out. The links are below. Just click it, take it you right there. Find out more about how to get involved in understanding stocks, Bitcoin, and just about everything that has to do with finances, and kind of help you along. It's a good way to understand and to maybe invest. I think you might want to take a look at this. God bless all of you. We'll be back. We'll see you next time right here on the coming apocalypse.